Alrighty guys, it's Chris. Welcome back to BHP Engines. I got a story for you. Two stories actually, and they came in the same night. This is great. And it's, I touch on this from time to time. I'm not going to let it go. Why am I not going to let it go? Because other people won't let it go. People every once in a while pop up on an old video for the JDM import engines or whatnot, or for whatever reason, or try to school me on how it's more cost effective to use one of these import engines or whatnot. And also, another topic, single cams and how much power they can hold on stock on boost, right? And I'm always like, and people, they're just diehards on what they feel they believe and they know because what their homeboy has done, and they just don't want to let shit go and they hold on to it forever. So, just gonna tell you about the tale of two blown single cams and JDM import engine woes. You can see my son's dumb ass down there. You see that? Did you see that in the oven? God. Okay, so the other day, last week, Alfred came from Fort Myers to drop off a single cam for me. We are doing a no-notch Vitara build for him. He's getting a long block, as a matter of fact. He's getting the whole thing. So that's the Sohc that I'm currently got on the stand and I'm preparing, the one that got stuck the other day. So anyway, he's telling me the story about how he came across his turbo kit, right? And he said he has a friend who bought a precision turbo and a custom fabricated intercooler piping and everything, right? And then he just threw it on a stock block. So he spent big money on this turbo kit, right? And then so Alfred, being the smart guy he is, told his friend, like, hey man, you might want to be careful on how how much power you squeeze out of this thing. And he's like, nah man, don't worry about it. As long as you get a good tune, it'll hold the power. Guys, a good tune is very important. You need a competent tuner for fuel and all that shit, man. You need somebody who really knows what they're doing. But it doesn't matter how good the guy is at his job, the stock components can only hold so much. The stock components can only hold what the stock components can hold. And it has been a thing that 300 horsepower is guaranteed failure, man. I can't tell you exactly where in the range you're guaranteed to start to break, but I know if you're in that 300 horsepower range or close to it, you're gonna fucking fail, all right? And the reason why I set the expectations a lot lower is because the rods are literally this big in a single cam. If you don't believe me, find yourself a D16 rod and put your pinky on it. It will fit straight with the rod, all right? So when you're taking that engine that normally makes like 110, 120, even 90 something horsepower, depending on the block that you have, that's not meant to fucking, it's like you're tripling the power, man. You're tripling your power levels. So you're triple the power. Right now, you can safely double the power. I think that, that's one thing. If you do 200, 210, 220, I think that you'll have very good long-term results in the single cam, as long as it is healthy and as long as you don't fuck up a misshift, right? As long as you don't overexert that shit in a sudden rage of a downshift into a gear that you ain't supposed to, it should hold together fairly well. Now, the reason why I've always talked about having my safe limits on builds and blocks and whatnot is because at least, okay, so if you have a failure in your Sohc in the 200 range, because it's still possible, just a lot less likely. But if you have a failure there, the chances are it's going to be a moderate failure. And when I mean moderate, because a blown engine is still a blown engine, right? But at least if you catch a rod knock or some shit, you spin a bearing at a lower power level, the chances are the engine as a whole is going to be destroyed. So you catch a rod knock, you take it apart, your head's still intact, the cylinder walls are still good, your fucking crank is just chewed up, right? So as opposed to if you go to 300 where you're tripling power and really milking that motherfucker, when you have a failure at that power level, it is catastrophic. All right? Catastrophic failure. So now his friend, after telling him, like, hey, you should be careful on how much power you squeeze out of this thing, and he's like, nah, it'll be fine. He immediately went out and got addicted to this power he's feeling because it's great for him. I think, I don't want to say it's the first time he felt it. I don't know him that well. But he's having a lot of fun with it. 5 hours after he rolled off the dyno, he threw a rod through the front and back of the block. Holes. Right? So the guy, after that, he's like, fuck this, and he parted out, right? So he posted the kit for sale, and his friend who warned him not to do that hopped on it, right? So he jumped on it. Now, Alfred being the smarter guy, he knew that that's pushing the levels and not to be beating on it all the time, right? So I don't remember how long he said he had it, but I know that when he got it, he got the kit, he put on a stock single cam, and he was also running it for a while at around 300 horsepower, and it did also fail and put a whole fucking rod through the block. So the block that he brought me the other day is a backup that he had. So that's cool. So yeah, the block he originally had the kit on had the fucking rod through the block. Now see, there's a lot of times I tell you, like, we don't know how long a stock block will last at this power level and all that stuff. Yeah, because there's so many factors to go into it, like how often do you get on it, you know, like all these things to go to consider. So sometimes a block doesn't really last as long as you think it might last from time, you know, that's gone by, just because of the fact of driving conditions, right? But 2 single cams, 2 different time frames, same level of power, both of them ended with a rod through the block. So that's how Alfred wound up coming to me to get this built engine, right? So now we're in the process of building him a Vitara no notch. So now the other story that I got the same day later that night, right, is now we're going back to Roger, right, the guy that I built the LS for, the Nippon Racing LS. Now that I'm not going to go into again because I've already talked about it enough times, right? So he had to pull that block, right, and we were in between that engine and doing a 1,000 horsepower build. That's the goal. The next goal is a 1,000 horsepower engine. We've already got the setup, or I've already got the setup picked out and aside. We just need, you know, Roger came into some family issues. We need to let some time go by, and then we will execute. But the goal is at some point this year, 1,000 horsepower, right? So in the meantime, just to have him as a fun car that you can have, because it's not his daily driver, his Civic, right? He wanted to save some time and just grab something cheap and easy, right? So he went and spent $500. I think it was $500, and he got a JDM B20, imported JDM B20 engine, right? Now, I don't I think that anything from $500 and less from a JDM import shop is completely fine, completely justifiable using it, right? Because you're not spending that much money. So if you run into a dud for whatever reason, it's not the end of the world. It's just $500, right? Now, my problem has always been is when they put these engines out there with like $1,800 price tags, you know, shit like that. That's crazy, especially considering some of the blocks that they want the $1,800 for. It's just next level, out of this world. No way in hell I'm paying that, right? And then the people that are smart and they always say, oh, but the warranty, right? Yes and no. Unless you're putting it in right the fuck away, your warranty doesn't mean shit, because they only give you 30 days to get this thing up and running. And it always takes people longer than 30 days to get the car up and running. Always does. And then, if you go back and look at the fine print on that warranty, there are a fuck ton of those parts on that engine block that you need to replace before your warranty is valid. They tell you got to replace the timing belt and tensioner and water pump. They tell you got to replace the oil pump. They tell you got to replace spark plugs. A whole bunch of shit on that engine that you have to put on there brand new to make that warranty valid. If not, it's not warranted. So what happened in Roger's case, right? Now, Roger put the in there, put the B20 in, and he had it, and he tuned it, right? And then he found out that he had a spark plug, though I believe a spark plug that was dead, right? And he was getting a misfire. Now that wasn't on the engine's fault. It was on his side, right? And then we also come to find out that those spark plugs are the same spark plugs that came out, or I find out that the spark plugs are the same ones that come out of the Nippon Racing block. So we have one dead cylinder in that block right now, and we think that it's because the engine hasn't come apart yet. We are not 100% sure on what the problem is. If he was local to me, I would have had that fucking engine apart a long time ago, and we would have immediately found out what the problem was. But I just said I wasn't going to touch on it, but I'm going to fucking do it anyway. God damn it. So there's many factors. For those of you that have already heard this, I'm sorry that you're hearing this so many times, but there's so many things to it. And then I keep finding out new little things, new little tidbits of information that we didn't have before. So we went dead in one cylinder on the Nippon Racing block. Now the initial thought and concern was that it's too much power. Now I do believe it was well above 500 wheel horsepower. And I do believe it was on tune on pump, so it wasn't even E85. So once you can make 500 plus on pump, but if you cross 500 wheel horsepower on pump, you're playing with fire, for the fuel ratios and all that bullshit. I don't know the details Jeff from CSS one time went into it on me and in a comment, and he had it much better, but I don't remember the exact thing. But I know it's you're playing with fire with fuel, and you can have better chances for detonation or whatnot if you go that high in power on pump, right? So his tuner, who's tuned similar cars and similar build setups, similar turbo with that kind of boost pressure. He said that it was like the last guy that he saw like that was like 600 horsepower. So I don't know if it was 600 horsepower. We can't confirm that because it was never on a dyno. But I do believe at the boost pressure, from my experience inside, that how much PSI he was pushing, the kind of turbo it was, the setup it was, that he was for sure 500 plus. Now I warranty all the different racing builds at 500. So you take it past that, you're not in the safe range anymore, right? So that's the first thing, right? So the second thing is like, because that's a common failure once you get to that high level of power, is that you have a ringland failure. Now, my secondary concern for that was maybe the gap was too tight. And it's possible that the gap was on the tight side for how much boost you wound up running, because it was like 28 pounds. So, but there wasn't any kinds of indication in the cylinders of ring drag. Now, so what happens if you run the gap too small is that the piston rings will butt up against each other, right? And which will cause them to flare out. So if you take apart an engine block and you see like these long thin lines vertically running up the cylinder, that's typically a sign of ring drag. Or it's possible that you had debris in there and it was just dragging on the piston. But anyway, the cylinders were clean, scar free. So that makes me feel a lot more comfortable that the rings weren't too small, even though it potentially could have been for how much boost you wound up running. And so there's that, right? And then now we have the added point of super high power for that piston, plus pump fuel, plus fucked up spark plug. So it was just a recipe of disaster for that situation that he had going on there. Now to get back to the B20 he got from the import shop, that I think a month after he got into driving that car, or a month after he got into driving on the engine, he's having signs of low oil pressure. Now, remember, like I was talking about just the other day with that stuck rotating assembly, he had the light flashing, right? Now, that oil light flicker thing has been one of my most gone back to and viewed videos that I've ever made. And I never thought that would be the case, but it is. And I guess it makes sense because of the fact that same problem that happens to more than just Honda guys. It happens to everybody. It can happen to anybody. And that light flashing is indicative of low oil pressure. That's the warning, right? That's usually either you have a bad sensor or you have a failing pump. That's really the only two things it can be. So he gets the fucking the block, and then he's running after 1 month of running the engine, he's getting the oil light flicker, low oil pressure. So it's like, damn. Well, like how long ago did you put that in the car? Are you past your 30 days? He's like, yeah, I'm past my 30 days. You passed your 30 days, the warranty's gone, right? And then on top of that, the warranty wouldn't have been valid regardless anyway, because of the fact, well, I might be wrong there, because it might have been just that one shop that I was looking at where the warranty was only valid if you change those parts. I'm not sure if that's an across the board thing, but I want to say that I bet that is. But let's just say that it's not an across the board thing. Let's just say that you don't have to change out any of those parts and they still give you warranty, right? Well, that means that 30 days after he got that engine, the oil pump started to fail. And now he can't do shit about it except change the pump. Now, I know that for most people, that's not really that big a deal, not that big of a job. But if you're one of these guys, you're so picky and you're so fucking being so cheap that you gotta, nitpick pennies. I want to go on a limb and say that most of those people that are doing that probably can't even change the oil pump themselves. So now not only do you have to fucking buy a new oil pump, but you got to find somebody that's going to put that motherfucker on for you. And the oil pump failure and that oil starvation is no joke. You can blow that engine anytime after that fucking light comes on. And now that I've been in that engine the other day and I took it apart and seen the damage is done and seen that the bearings weren't spun yet, now I feel 100% confident in saying that as soon as that light, I've always felt pretty confident, but now I'm like super fucking confident that when that light comes on, if you do not immediately cut that fucking car off and get to it, you definitely could fuck your shit up. Now, same thing happened to me like one time where I had my B16, like it would flicker, and I would drive and it would be fine, and then it would flicker at idle. And that's because when you speed up, the pump is turning and pumping by the crank. So you get more volume and more power to that pump when you're driving. But when you're on idle, you're not getting the kind of power it needs, and the pump is on its way out. So you're starving your engine. And later on, that B16 block, when they went to go for a rebuild, it turns out it was fucked up. I had to replace the block. When the guy was reassembling it and just put the crankshaft in, the crank got stuck. It wouldn't rotate. So it wound up, I think, that oil starvation plus, engine overheating, like later on I had overheating issues. I think I fucking warped the shit on that block. So guys, do not play with that oil pump light. And it just goes to show again, like guys, if you're buying these JDM engines, I don't give a fuck what anybody tells you, bro. These guys do not know the mileage of these engines unless they are going to Japan and opening the car, checking the dash, and then pulling it out themselves. They don't know the miles. All they're doing is telling you something that they've been told by somebody else. And if you think that there's businesses out in Japan that are all super honorable and samurai-like and not shady at all, that's not the case. And Mython Films, a long time ago, years ago, had a very good video covering this topic, the reason why these JDM import engines are all advertised as low mileage. And that's because in Japan, apparently, it's really expensive to own a car, and typically speaking, that people don't own a car long enough to put more than 50,000 miles on it. So what they're going off of for the low mileage is a national average type deal. But it still doesn't cover the condition. You don't know if these cars have been in a flood or whatever reason or whatever way they found their way to a junkyard, because these guys are importing engines from cars that are in the junkyards over there. It's not like they're going and buying new cars and sending us engines that they know they're running. It's junkyard import engines to our import engine stations that are more or less junkyards themselves. So don't overhype these fucking JDM engines, and don't sit here and try to tell me that buying one of those engines is better than doing a refresher on something you can get locally. Because if you're competent enough to build an engine, if you can build an engine and you're not in a rush to get that engine or whatever, and you wait and you go to the market and you get one, you can get one a lot of times even still cheaper than what you get from the JDM engines. And especially if you're talking about like a K20A2 or a K24A2, something like that, they sell way less than what they get from an import shop. And if you're competent enough to be able to do anything for a refresher of this engine, it's not that big a deal to open that motherfucker up, check your bearings, see if they're healthy, get a new set of rings. At the end of the day, you'll have a fresh 0 miles engine, or 0 miles at least in certain areas that you choose to change or not change, right? Versus getting one that's potentially extremely expensive that you don't really know whether it's going to fail or not. You don't know how any engine's condition is until you're inside of it. You never know. All right, so that's my story time for the day. I know that I kind of went off on a side tangent there about Roger's shit. I can't help it. Sorry. But yeah, that's it. That's all I want to talk about for right now. And these were kind of like bonus videos anyway. They weren't really something I had planned. It's just something I thought about I want to do. All right, guys, so thanks for watching. Social media links are in the description down below. Patreon's down there as well. For anybody who donates at least $1 a month, you get yourself a 10% discount on labor and parts. If you donate $20 a month, you get yourself a 15% discount. I know it may not seem like too much, but when you're talking about high dollar items, the discount is significant. All right, guys, thank you for watching, and peace.